Okay? Critical points that I want you to label before even addressing this are endpoints. So we're going to label this -1, 2, 3, -2. Zeros. I'm going to zoom way in here. This 0, now we're going to have to estimate that that's at -1, -2. Let's just keep it simple. -2.5, even though it doesn't look quite. Okay, that's that point. Kind of vertex type points. So this would be -1, 3. Y-intercepts. That's 0, 2. Here's another x-intercept at point, let's say just 0.5 to keep it simple. Here's another minimum point, which is at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3, -5. Here's another x-intercept at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll just say 5.2. And then here's another endpoint at 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 4. So let's get that out there first, so we're not constantly looking at our numbers. Now, I've sort of organized this: increasing, decreasing, and constant. Those are all words that are talking about the slope, okay? When is the slope increasing? From when to when? Now, whenever you're doing interval notation, you look at just your x-axis. So you're really only looking at your x numbers. There's very few times where we're looking at our y number to answer a question. So this graph is increasing from here to here. Do we all agree? So what are the x coordinates of that? That's from -3 over to -1. So your interval notation would look like this, starting at -3 and ending at -1. And it's not actually increasing at -3 since it's an endpoint, and it's not actually still increasing at -1, which is why we don't use brackets, we use parentheses. Okay? Then it starts decreasing, starting at -1, and isn't it decreasing all the way to here, which is at what number? 3. So from -1 to 3, we're decreasing. Good? Back to our graph. Then we start increasing again from 3 until 6. Are we good? And because we have the coordinates there, we've made our life easier. We don't need to keep counting over and over again. So from 3 to 6, it's increasing again. So here's a new point. We have two intervals along which it's increasing. You kind of join those two intervals together with this union symbol, just a little U. That's a math thing that they'll use on your regents that you should learn how to interpret that. So it's increasing twice, from -3 to -1 and from 3 to 6. It's decreasing only the one interval, and there is no constant interval. There's no kind of flat line. Agreed? Okay, so we have nothing there, so do that symbol. Now, domain and range is another category we've talked about, but let's look at. Domain is x coordinates, so what's the lowest x coordinate this ever reaches? -3. Does it include -3? Yes, that's a solid point. So that includes -3, so we'll do that with a bracket. So from -3 to up to what? What's the highest x value? 6. Does it include 6? Yes, it's a closed circle. So yes, we use a bracket. Now range, like I said, is one of the few times we're going to look at the y coordinates. What's the lowest y coordinate? Does it actually have a point at -5? Yes. Up until, you see the y coordinate of 4? Is everyone good there? So from -5 up until 4, and both of those points are solid, so they're both included. Hence the brackets. Any questions so far? Just a small note. Increasing, decreasing, and constant intervals will always use parentheses. Okay? Domain and range, it depends on the problem and what they look like, what the endpoints look like, if they're open circles or closed circles. Okay? Positive and negative. Positive means above the x-axis. Negative means below. Okay? When is the function positive means when is it above the x-axis? Can everyone focus in here? Do we all agree that it's above the x-axis right there? That's from what x-coordinate? -2.5 up until 0.5, I labeled that. Is it actually above the x-axis at -2.5? No, so that's going to be with a parenthesis. Is it actually above the x-axis at 0.5? No, just everything in between. So we're going to say with parentheses, -2.5, comma, 0.5 with parentheses. Is it ever positive again? Yes, Andrew, from when to when?
5.2.
Yep. 5.2 to 6. At 5.2, is it actually above the x-axis? No. At 6, is it actually above the x-axis? Yes. So that one's going to get a bracket. From 5.2, I'm using that little union symbol again, from 5.2 to 6 with a bracket. Does that make sense? Okay? Evan, can you tell me the at least one interval where this is negative? Okay, go smallest to biggest though. So -3. Right. Does that include -3? Yes, it's actually negative at -3. Up until -2.5, does that include the -2.5? No. Right? Right at -2.5, is that point below the x-axis? No, it's on the x-axis, so it's not actually negative right there. Okay, good. We're going to have to make a few mistakes with this before it really sinks in. Where is it negative again? Micah. From what, 0.5 until 5.2. Does that include 0.5? No. Does it include 5.2? Good. So they're both parentheses. Nice job. So 0.5 to 5.2. Perfect. So there's a little bit on positive and negative. Good? Relative minimum points. Okay? Relative minimums and relative maximums are going to be different than absolute min and absolute max. Okay? Relative means it's kind of a turnaround point. Meaning this one. That's a relative maximum. Because relative to the points on the left and relative to the points on the right, it's a relative maximum. This one is not a relative maximum because it has no points to the right of it that turned around. Does that make sense? So relatives have to be sort of turnaround points. So the relative minimum point is this little vertex here, 3, -5. And the relative maximum point is this one here, negative 1, 3. Now, a couple things. These points, these parentheses that I just used are because it's a point. This is not interval notation, right? I'm just listing a point. You have to understand the context. So that's the first thing I'll say. I will also add in here, and I want you to do this, a relative minimum value. If they ask for a point, you give the coordinates. If they ask for the relative minimum values, that's just the y coordinate number. The relative minimum value is negative 5. The relative maximum value is 3. Keep that in mind. Are they asking for the point where I'm going to give coordinates, or are they asking for the value? Value is just the y coordinate. Again, one of the few times we'll use the y coordinate. Okay? Now, an absolute minimum point is the absolute lowest point the graph ever reaches. Okay? What is the lowest point this graph ever reaches? Cameron. Point. I need the x coordinate and the y coordinate both. 3, negative 5. So something can be a relative minimum and the absolute minimum. If they ask you for the absolute minimum value, again, you're just going to give the y coordinate of negative 5. How about the absolute maximum point? Connor. 6'4". Now that's different than the relative maximum, which can happen. And therefore the absolute max value is just 4. Okie doke. And then the x-intercepts, we said were negative 2.5, 0.5, and 5.2. So we can just list those. X equals negative 2.5, 0.5, and 5.2. And the y-intercept values is just 2. Any questions here? All right. I would like to jump down to 2, where I don't have a picture. Okay? I have no image. I have to use my calculator. So, go to your y equals, type it in, x squared minus 2x minus 3. And I don't know where all of your windows left off, but are we all familiar with Zoom 6 by chance? Zoom 6? Anybody? If everyone hits Zoom and then look at option 6 that says standard and just hit the number 6, it will bring everybody's graph back to negative 10 to 10 and negative 10 to 10. And if we need to adjust the window from there, we can. Okay? Are we good here? All right, I want you to draw a rough sketch of that. Now, technically, this parabola goes on forever, yes? Okay, so put arrows at the end. And then we need to start labeling our critical points. So, how do we find this point? What is that point called? A 0. An x-intercept, but your calculator is going to call it a 0. So you hit second trace, Option 2 is finding a 0, so we're going to do that. And when you get to your screen, you should have a cursor blinking, and it should say left bound. Scroll over to the left. Mason, are you stuck somewhere?
No.
Make sure if at any point your calculator is bugging out and you just come right up here and bring it to me. I don't want you to get behind. So just bring it right up and have me look at it. So once you get your cursor to the left of this 0 that we're interested in, hit enter. And then scroll your cursor just to the right of that 0 that we're interested in. Hit enter. It'll say guess. So hit enter one more time. And we find out that we have a 0 at -1. So on my quick little sketch, I'm going to label that. I'm going to find my other one at the same time so we can repeat this. So second trace, for those of you who might have gotten lost the first time. Option 2 is 0. Now I'm going to look for this one. So I need to bring my cursor, bring it up here, Cameron. Bring my cursor to the left of that. Hit enter. And then it's going to say right bound, bring it to the right of that. Hit enter. And then guess, hit enter. And we're going to get 3, 0. Okay, everybody pause there because we're going to learn from Cameron right now. Because you're all going to get to a point where you're going to have an error and something's going to happen and we got to figure out why. Okay, you're all going to get there. It's just a matter of when. And I don't want it to be on the Regents and have you not know what to do. So Cameron just did something and he got this. It's usually going to tell you what the error is. Window range. Something is wrong with his window. So if you go to his window, we'll quit, and then hit window. Here's the problem. He's telling his graph that he wants to see from 10 to 10. He wants it to start at 10 and end at 10. Do you see how that's confusing? What he meant was -10 to 10 and -10 to 10. Now when he graphs it, he should be all good. Okay? So make sure, and as you come up with errors, please make yourself vulnerable and show me so we all can learn from your mistake, because we're all going to make it at some point. All right, the next critical point, right here. Does anybody know how we find the y-intercept on our calculator? Yep. You can go to the table, and what would you be looking for on the table? When x equals 0. So there is one option. Okay? How about from your second trace menu? It's actually option 1, value. You can do this not just for the y-intercept, but for anything. If you want to say what your x-coordinate is, we want an x-coordinate of 0, and hit enter, it will give us the y-coordinate that goes along with whatever x we plug in. So 0, -3. What other point are we interested in? The minimum, good. So on your second trace menu, what do you think we should pick? Minimum. Scroll down to minimum. Again, it's going to have left bound, right bound. You need to bring your cursor to the left of the minimum, which mine already is, so hit enter. And to the right of the minimum, scroll over, hit enter, and enter through the guess, and you're going to get, now this happens sometimes. It's essentially it's 1. It's 1 -4. There's some kind of pixel error on your calculator that makes that happen from time to time. But if it's that obviously, 0.9999999, it's 1 -4. Okay? Andrew, did you have a question?
I got lost on how to get the y.
The y-intercept? Hit second trace, and then the value, and x equals 0, and hit enter. So 0, -3. Good? Okay. All right, so now if we go over to our box here, we have interval notation that we need to get at. When is this increasing? When is it increasing? Raise your hand if you think you can say when it's increasing. Someone I haven't heard from today. Oh yeah, go ahead. What's your first name? Connor. It's increasing from 0 to, would you say 0 to -3? If I pointed visually, we all can see that it starts increasing from here and then forever, right? Okay? What is the x value of when that occurred? 1. So it's increasing. Remember, we're always looking at the x coordinates. From 1 to, when does it stop increasing? Never. So to infinity, right? So 1, and here's our infinity symbol. Are we good with that? Okay. Decreasing. This has been decreasing the entire time, correct? So this has been decreasing from negative infinity on our x-axis all the way up until when? 1. So it's decreasing from negative infinity to 1. Andrew. Nope, because it's not actually increasing here. It's actually the turnaround point, so it's not decreasing or increasing. Does that make sense? I'll say it again, I said it before. All things increasing, decreasing, and constant, always use parentheses. Always, always. Okay? So here's your homework. It's small. Finish filling in this box. Okay? Finish filling in that for your homework, and we'll continue with the rest tomorrow. Just that box. Just on this one problem that we're looking at. It's very short. Do it right on the worksheet, but with a pencil so we're prepared to erase tomorrow if we made a mistake.